The Alpha Sessions.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Alpha Sessions. Today in the studio I have Nata.
Hello.
Welcome back, I should say, because you've been here before. But that was way back in 2020.
Yes.
So for those who haven't seen you on the show before, tell us a bit about where you're from.
I am Nata. I'm a London-based Moldovan artist. I'm a singer-songwriter. And this is me.
Very nice. So that was way back in 2020, which was obviously, it feels like a long time ago. A lot has changed for a lot of people. How much has changed since we last saw you? What have you been up to? It's been quite a gap.
It's been quite a gap indeed. I like to say BC, like before Corona, after Corona. So the way people say like in historical times before Christ, after Christ, I say BC but rebranded. So yeah, you did see me in BC. I feel like my life hasn't luckily changed much because just like any artist, I have suffered a lot during COVID times with all the cancellations and everything. And to be honest, that lasted for a year, which is quite a long time. And then when things got back, when things started in COVID times, like March 2020, it felt like everything went away within a week. Like my life went from 100 to 0 in a week. And it was crazy and it was devastating. And then literally a year later, I think it was like April 2021, this whole life came back within also a week, and both were equally as overwhelming because it was kind of exciting. And you know, like after a year of just staying home and pretending and seeking attention on live streams, you go back to normal and playing gigs 3 days a week and talking to people. And yeah.
Well, was it a nice break for you? Because we were talking about this before. You're very busy, like packed out days on end.
Sometimes.
Is this something you thrive on, or did you think did you take a minute when you had that sort of year gap to think, hey, I kind of need this break?
It's an interesting one because I think the busyness is quite recent. I always liked being busy. I'm one of those people that, I can kind of lose myself in the empty days. So having empty days is not good for me. So I pack them. But also this is quite new, like the intensity that's happening right now and the amount of things around me, like in my artist project as well as in the other endeavors and life. And I think as of recently as well, there's this really interesting will to have an intense social life or a travel life, which is new because after COVID, I wasn't amongst the people who wanted to get out of the country and travel and go out. And I was quite like, I closed myself up a little bit, but now, like few weeks now, maybe a couple months, I booking writing sessions, holidays, retreats, and I'm like, who is this new person? So yeah, I think that's making it even more intense.
So it was a rewarding time. It kind of gave you a minute to think what you wanted. And
yeah, definitely rewarding, definitely. But I didn't know that up until the end. Like whilst I was in it, I was like, oh, this really sucks. But yeah, I think when we came out of it, I'm like, this time was essential to what I'm doing right now because it like set the ground for everything.
Your lifestyle. Yeah, nice. So you gig a lot. And I want to talk about what you pack your days out with because I find it fascinating that you do so much and you balance it all. And a lot of people struggle to make the balance, probably including me, trying to sort of learn that.
Oh, I struggle big time.
You style it out. So
I try to.
But what do you pack your days out with at the moment?
So I've got, I basically run like a little teaching hustle, that's what I like to say, which is also something that started pre-COVID, but during the 1 year that I had, I qualified a lot, like self-qualified a lot. So I'm classically trained in piano, so now I'm just kind of elevated, upgraded, and I kind of enjoy the part that feels like running your own business rather than the teaching. Like, if any of my students are listening to this, I love you guys, but I think I wouldn't like necessarily like working in a school. I like the tutoring, I like the, and also I have a residency contract with a place called Capet, which also has been happening since 2 years ago, but it's now gone from 2 days a week to 4 days a week. Also pre-COVID, I had other contracts with other residencies, mostly like gastropub and brunch events and stuff. Now it's cocktail bars and evening late night gigs, and it's intense. It feels like every day. So and then on top of that, I have my artist project, and I work with Sofa Sounds as well. So 4 things.
It's a lot. It's a good range though. It's a good range. How did you get into the residencies? How did that begin?
I think the residencies is just kind of a word that was born along because it's the same place over and over again, so you have to call it a residency. But before that, I had similar gigs. I never had, which I kind of always preferred, and I felt very lucky to have them, to be honest. I think ever since uni, I've had regular gigs, like regular events, or like it's always friends also. So to answer your question, this is how I got into it. I am friends with people who set up these like every Saturday brunch event, every Friday night live acoustic, So this is how it started. It was mostly, as I said, gastropubs and kind of like breweries and stuff like that. So I would play these a lot, and they were regular, and I would call them residencies. And then with Coupette, they reached out to me, and that was like the first cocktail bar situation. And now I'm in this world, which is like the cruise ship hotel people, rather than like musicians who play commercial venues, which was just an automatic route, you know.
It's a good community because it's like a huge network, and everybody seems to know each other, and it is the way to like branch out, isn't it? But is it centered in London? Because you haven't always lived in London, if I'm right.
No, I haven't. Yeah, so in London, I did the maps the other day, and it's crazy to think that I've been in London for nearly 7 years. No, for 7 years, just 7 years. Because I used to say stuff like, oh, I moved to London a couple years ago. A few years ago, I'm like, hang on a second. No, 2015. This has always been in London, yes. So, because if it wasn't, then I don't think I'd be allowed in a bar when I was 16. So, and I moved to London when I was 16. So, yes, it started in London.
And you were, I think you talked about this with Alan in 2020, but I think you were in the country before, in a boarding school or something. And is that where everything began? When you moved to London, is that when all of this sort of began? Or do you class your earlier years as like the forming? Yeah, definitely. So I moved to England when I was 13, going on 14. And I went to a school, it's called Train Park. And I spent a few years there. It was an interesting journey, definitely. It kind of made me realize that I need to do what I'm doing now, or at least realize that I need to do, or like when I moved to London, I've realized that, I've said realize maybe 5 times now, I've realized that I need to do commercial music. I did musical theatre for the first couple of years. But before that, I basically lived in Eastern Europe and did pretty much the same thing. To be honest, I've been doing music since I can remember. One of those people. So, you know, I've spoken to a lot of people recently who their roots are in musical theatre, and it seems to be quite a good, because it's such a huge network. Again, like, it's all about that big network, but it's also just good for musical training. Because you said you're classically trained piano.
Yeah, I am, but very differently from what people classify as classical training, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I never went to school. I never did. I didn't do like ABRSM and stuff. That's like England standard. I did a very different board. I had 1-to-1 lessons. But yes, I am classically trained. I didn't play commercial music until I was like 16. And I hated piano, which is part of the class, which is how you know you're classically trained.
Because you grow to hate.
Yes, absolutely. It's part of the package.
Oh, wow. But your music is still kind of very theatrical in the sort of, it's very romantic, the way it sounds, all the chord progressions.
I like that, romantic.
It comes from that romantic theatre. And I think that comes through in Chocolate and Red Wine, which is one of the songs you play for us today. And that came out like 2019, right? So again, that's like crazy, a long time ago, even though it feels like a year ago or something.
Yeah.
So how was that process from your musical theatre roots to writing in a more commercial way to then just like releasing a song like that? How was that process?
I think moving to London, and so you're absolutely right to say like the root was, I started music when I was 4, but the root of like Nata music probably began ever since London, because that's when I started thinking, okay, what do I want my sound to be like? What did a songwriter has to write about 20 songs before they can actually write. So I think by the time I moved to London, I had like a good amount of songs in the bag, and I was like, okay, but what am I actually going to write now? Like now that I have to write. And I did have an artist in mind who has been kind of an inspiration, but more of a reference to me. Her name's Regina Spektor. I don't know if you've heard of Regina Spektor, but as I said, it's not necessarily an inspiration. Like I didn't listen to her ever since when, but the sound that she had, she's got Russian roots. The sound that she has, her first album is called Soviet Kitsch. So I think it was an interesting reference for me to have. It's like, there is an Eastern European artist. The representation of it was very important to me, who plays piano, who does this like pop and theatrical sound. And I was like, okay, I'm not the first one, but then I can take this and I can like rebrand it. Yeah. And I think ever since that, I've established that my sound is theatrical, and that's fine. And I can still do pop, and I can still, talk about stuff that people in indie music talk about, and not necessarily stick to musical theatre, because that's not me. That makes sense.
Yeah. So would you class Chocolate and Red Wine as like this pivotal song, the one that started Nata
Definitely, yeah.
And is it a personal story? Is it something that came from the heart, or is it a story about others?
It is. I think I spoke about it the last time I was here. And it was a funny thing, because Alan mentioned the fact that my first 2 singles, I wrote them when I was, how do I put this nicely, slightly under the influence of alcohol. And it's not always like, it's literally just the 2 off songs that happen. So when I wrote Chocolate and Red Wine, because I wrote both Chocolate and Red Wine and No Rush, my second single, in the peak of uni days, and I did songwriting at uni, which explains it. So I wasn't just writing songs for fun. This is what the scenarios were. Like, we had to write songs pretty intensely, like 2 or 3 a week. And I was a typical student going out a lot. So basically, which is crazy because it was only like 3 years ago, and now I'm like, I'm dying to go to bed at 9 p.m, but I can't. But yeah, I would be out up until late, and then I would clock that, tomorrow's Friday. I need to have a song. So I'd come home and I'd be like, okay, what drafts do I have? Let's go. So Chocolate and Red Wine and the second single, No Rush, were written in those days. And Chocolate and Red Wine is about like a weird love for a friend you like can't have. I guess it's been a while. I even forgot the story. And it's very detailed. It describes like specific scenarios of this is where I am, this is where you are, this is what we're doing. And I like writing songs when they're very imagery based and telling a story through details like this bottle of water, this red carpet, or this something, rather than like, you left me,
Yeah, I mean they're still quite poetic though. Like they're quite they're not just on the nose. Yeah, which is nice, and again quite romantic.
Thank you. But I take that as a compliment, a huge compliment.
Waiting for trains to take us home to sunrise. Knocks on the door so you don't miss the show at midnight. Watching your friend play, he's about to do a headline. Back of the room, chocolate and red wine. People around, idealize us too. They don't understand that I'll never belong to you. Keeping it silent is so hard when you're fine. After the night of chocolate and red wine. Don't think about us, I'm pretty sure there's nothing to say. Books lie about love and films portray the easy way. There's nothing to hold on to in a city of blood other than you, chocolate and red wine. I remember taxi cabs and Christmas lights, late December, who empty streets, perfect skylines, late night talking. I imagine what it's like for a moment, be a part of your life. Here I am, waiting for you to walk in. It's been a long time, I don't know where to begin. I'm sorry it took me a while to realize loving you is not a crime. Loving you is chocolate and red wine.
The Alpha Sessions.
Do you feel like your sound has changed a lot since then? Because you say, like, as you said, you can't really remember the whole story then, and it feels like years ago. So your single just came out recently, Science.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there's this complete disconnect between the two in terms of your sound, or do you feel like you've developed in a very natural way? Or
I think after I put out Chocolate and Red Wine, I had a moment where I was like, this is not what I want to sound like for the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was one of those songs that I wanted to put out, and I didn't really have a lead. Like, I only had this song, and I've never released before. And I'm like, I'm gonna put this out and see what people think, which now is the best thing I could do back in the day. But then I think when I put out my second single, everybody, like, the emotion that everybody was experiencing was shock, because it's a guitar song, it's an upbeat pop, like I want to say ballad, but it's not necessarily like a ballad like Chocolate and Red Wine style. It has swear words, and it has very universally like teenager young language. I think a lot of people are like, wait, is this the same thing? Is this supposed to go to someone else? I'm like, no, this is me. So I think a second single, I had a bit of a freak out, and I decided to release something really extreme to immunize people for my sound. But yeah, and then I feel like Science is the perfect middle ground, and this is what I'm like, and this is what I want to sound like, and from now on it's just a journey of alterations rather than changing the extremes of the sonic identity. That makes sense. So yeah,
so there is a natural development there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still this theme that kind of it always feels like your music, but even though it has this different sound.
Yeah.
But kind of, I mean, speaking of development, is this something, artistry, music, is this something you said you started at 4, but was there anything else in your life that you almost thought like you might want to do instead? Or was this always the only thing for you?
I don't think so. But then again, I like to think of myself as a very multi-dimensional. Can you say that? Maybe. Multi-dimensional, and I'm very like entrepreneurial, I guess, as well. I enjoy that. I enjoy having. But I'm a creative entrepreneur. Like, I would never ever go into something strictly corporate, for example. Like, definitely staying off of that. So to answer your question, yes, because growing up, I knew I was creative, but I also knew that there's like a businessy side of me. So I either need to be an artist, like, because artists nowadays, what are we? We're literally like businessmen and women who like, you're an artist yourself, you know that, who we have to take care of everything, and we have to take care of the creative side. And then I think with the other things that I do in my life is just, you know, it's taking me even further, but everything is still very creative, and everything's still very entrepreneurial, creative. So if I wasn't doing music, to do musical theatre, I had to do dance and acting. That's how I got into musical theatre, because it was kind of equal all the time. I was doing music, mainly piano. That was my focus. I didn't really do singing lessons or anything up until later on. I did guitar. I took like a couple lessons of guitar. I played drums. I did dance and acting, and that took me to musical theatre, and that took me to England. But from there on, I always knew that even if I wasn't to do music, I would still be a creative who's in charge of their own life and their own stuff and their own, like, you know, it's kind of that buzz that I needed.
Yeah. Being from Moldova, is this something that has influenced the way that you talk about being a businesswoman, being active and trying everything? Is there quite a scene for this kind of thing in Moldova?
Definitely not. No offense to Moldova at all. But so the way actually, I think that's definitely relevant, because the way I came to England, it's not like I woke up one day and I'm like, I want to move to Hertfordshire. I live in the middle of nowhere in a town with a population of 2,000 people at the age of 14. Yeah. It wasn't like that at all. It was the fact that Moldova is very much lacking opportunity. Maybe not necessarily. I think I would love to revisit the idea of contributing to the development of the country, but I don't think I have enough like power at the moment. I'm a 23-year-old musician in London, but I think I really admire people. It's politically very messed up, so I do admire people contributing to the development, donating, you know, and if I ever have the chance to do so, for sure. But as an established country at the moment, it doesn't actually necessarily have a creative industry that thrives. Very blunt statement, but it happens to be true. So I think when you do something creative in places like that, you connect with people from the outside quite a lot. So like I was and it's a privilege really, because having done music from so early on, I had great like teachers and stuff, and parents. Like my mum wanted to be a bit of a dance mom and didn't know how. So they would kind of escort me out into these circles, and I traveled a lot for like competitions and things. I got a lot of bursaries. I got a lot of, so it's a build up of a life that you get. And to be fair with you, since like I had friends and I was in the middle of the culture, but for the last few years being in Moldova, it didn't feel like I was living there, because I was out so much and I was doing so much that felt like outside of what was surrounding me, like kind of like the equivalent of being trapped in your bedroom on GarageBand, but to me it was slightly different. So that led me to a bursary that I got, which took me to a school, which happened to be Tring Park in England. So it was a very like lucky thing to happen, and that's how I ended up where I ended up. Here today. Radio Broccoli.
Yeah. But don't you think this is all like, this is all part of you then, the way you songwrite is influenced by that whole background, or do you sort of completely separate that?
It's an interesting one because my Spotify bio says I can't remember the exact phrasing of it, but it was like something along the lines of I write sad girl pop songs to ignore my real trauma. So I think that's it's a very like dramatic way to say that, but I think it's a good way to think about it. Maybe less dramatically. It is if I was to write, political songs about poverty, and I don't think I would be able to make it fit into my sound. It's like a full chord progression.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. I did do a lot of that, especially at uni when we had to write things, and I would just take it very dark. And like there's been a few moments where I would like bring in songs, and back in the training process, my songs were very, very bad. I'd bring one of those songs per week, and it would be like about a guy I had a crush on when I was 18, and I was like 18 at the time, and it sounded like an Olivia Rodrigo wannabe. And then the next week we'd have to write a political song, and I'd bring in this song about like escaping from the third world and having to live in, and people would just listen and be like, well, that's all right, we can talk about that as well. I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry, like, did I go a bit too dark? It's like, is that how you really feel? It's like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry.
So you have this dark side of writing we were talking about, but that's not where science has come from, if I'm correct.
Not.
There's quite a story behind this one, which is why I wanted to ask you particularly, what is the meaning behind the new song Science?
Right. So get comfortable. So I did the way it actually started. If we take it back, I'm obsessed with Friends, like the TV show. And have you seen Friends?
Of course.
Okay,
of course.
Cool. Phoebe and David.
Yeah.
So I think that was like season 1, and I saw it, and I'm like, I'm a huge fan of symbolism, just things that you could mention and they just represent this whole atmosphere or concept or idea or something. So I was like, how nice is it to have I find people who, I don't know how to phrase this properly, but basically the fact that Phoebe fell in love with David and David was a scientist, like there's something very romantic about that, like having a scientist to fall in love with, because they do something extremely academic, and like falling in love is also like a scientific thing, it feels like. And it's very nice to just the concept of that. Anyways, but the first phrase that came to my mind was like, because it's not the kind of science you're used to, because they work in science and etc. etc. And I was like, yes, I could do something about it. And then it was an interesting process, this one, because I always like the way Chocolate and Red Wine was written, for example, is just storytelling. It's one scene, one character, let's go. With Science, when the first idea came to my head, I didn't actually have a lead. So it was crazy how there's a few things that just connected. Like I had triggers from so many different sides that I put together a character, but it's like a false character that I created. And I tried to make it as detailed as I could to make it as realistic as I could, which was a very new thing for me. Like having, the intensity of writing songs inspired by personal life all the time is impossible. So sometimes you kind of have to create your own narratives and stories and et cetera. And just one more thing I wanted to mention. The Science artwork is an interesting one because as a brilliant artist, and I think Chicago-based, called Lily, who made the artwork and the campaign and everything. And the concept was to make it look really weird, really scientific, really abstract, without actually representing an idea or a character. Like the character is so messed up and anonymous. It's like, okay, so the artwork is just like a somebody in a suit with a light bulb head, because they don't exist. It's been just triggered as ideas rather than inspired by a specific character. So yeah, we wanted to represent that in artwork as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the artwork because it is a unique thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is kind of an interesting process. So this isn't the way you usually write?
Not necessarily, at least at that point in time, because this was written nearly a year ago. Actually, no, longer than, like, the idea came to me a year ago. And I think, in the next few months it was written. And it didn't happen like in one night in half an hour. It happened over time. But then when it all came together, same thing happened, like 20 minutes and the song was done.
Yeah.
So,
Is that unusual then, to do it so quickly? Do you usually spend more time, or do you usually...
No, I think my most like played songs, I don't want to say successful because they're not released, but my most played songs are the ones I wrote very fast with a very strong idea, with a very strong narrative, because those are the easiest to write as well, when you have something like... The biggest struggle is having nothing to talk about, basically, and just sitting there like squeezing out that narrative is horrible. It's horrible.
Dear future potential, it's been a week since I met you, and I spend every day guessing what your life sounds like. You grew up on an island, told me you're into science. Well, in that case, Coldplay warned me ahead of time. I could write you a love song a day. I could take you to my favorite cafe in town. The family stuff. We could spend a whole night by the sea, or just Sundays binge watching TV in time. We could fall in love. Yeah, I could be good sometimes. I wanna steal all your midnights, and I hope you feel it too. 'Cause it's not the kind of science you're used to. Dear future potential, I believe I should mention that I've been trying to run into you for the last few days. I'll admit that I'm scared, and I'm not quite prepared for regret I could face if we let this slip away. I could write you a love song a day. I could take you to my favorite cafe in time. Do family stuff. Who could spend a whole night by the sea, or just Sundays binge watching TV in time. We could fall in love. Yeah, I could be good sometimes. I wanna steal all your midnights, and I hope you feel it too. 'Cause it's not the kind of science you're used to. Now I spend my days just tracking stories to maybe see your own name on the list. The idea of you makes all my wishes come true. Wish I practiced law before I met you. I'll need more experience than that, 'cause if we cut to the chase, it could be more than a mistake. Wish I could call you in the middle of the night, send you all the songs that I write about you. Cross my mind at 7 a.m. and I'm not even awake until 10. But you don't have a clue that I could be good sometimes. Show me stomach butterflies. How long till you realize this is not the kind of science you're used to? I'm down to spending the days in the lab, or maybe weekends in your hometown. 'Cause typical dating is overrated. Yeah. Dear future potential,
give it just a few moments time. And I could be a discovery that could change your life.
The Alpha Sessions.
So do you ever sit like on a hilltop somewhere and write the story, or do you always have the music along with you? Does music come first?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the hilltop. My equivalent of the hilltop is the 11th floor in my apartment overlooking construction site. So yeah, definitely a hilltop. But the 11th floor, and I have a roof, so it's fine. Yeah, I do that. Sometimes I think writing last year was a challenge with everything coming back. Definitely biggest writer's block up to date. Not block, just lack of time, lack of that sitting on a hilltop moment. So what happened recently is I started making time to write, which is new. How is this important? Because it's one thing when you have the inspiration right there, right now, late night, early morning, whatever works for people, and you sit down, you do it, you get it done in that specific moment. And it's another thing is when you schedule, right, 2 p.m. tomorrow, I'm going to write for 45 minutes. And I am like a very time-oriented, timing myself person to do tasks. So I literally put the timer on for 45 minutes and I have to write the lyric, finish the melody, which is interesting. It's new. That's new, definitely.
It's more like an exercise than a creative
which is
space.
a good new thing.
Yeah.
But it's different. It definitely made me start finishing songs as well more. So,
with that in mind, the third song you did for us was a new one, an unreleased one that you literally just wrote.
2 weeks ago, maybe, I want to say.
Yeah.
Maybe longer than that. I've lost track of time. So,
Was this the same process? Did you put a time aside and you sat down and that's how this song came about?
So this song is actually, I'm glad I picked Chocolate Red Wine, Science and this one because they represent very different times of my writing brain. Chocolate Red Wine was uni days, the way I used to write and like panicked for tomorrow after a night out. And Science is COVID writing, like that was peak of lockdown. And this is the new trying to balance my life, trying to make time to write amongst all the craziness. I'm also doing a project at the moment, 52 song project. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a really cool thing. It's but I need to catch up. With them, they motivate you to write a song a week.
Oh, for 52 weeks. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I have. Yeah, I know somebody who's doing this.
Yeah. So there's a lot of Alpha Sessions, like alumni, who are doing it as well. I'm with somebody who's called Sophie Kilburn in the same group. But yeah, it's a good thing. And another thing, I have a few projects on the side that like I'm writing for. So this is the first time in my life post-uni that I have to write. I don't have time to write. And I have to do it. So yeah, so it's making the time. It's kind of, it feels like work, you know? And it's interesting and it works. So with this song, I wrote it on guitar, which is unusual these days. And I think, what was it? I had a song in mind that I wanted to recreate. And it was a folk song. Also a new challenge that I'm on at the moment. Every time I write, I think of a song as a reference because I'm trying to expand my genre as much as I can. So, for example, I'll think of an artist, not necessarily a song, an artist, like let's recreate, I don't know. I'm trying to think of somebody like super, like a country artist that does like more folksy stuff, which was this song. I'm not going to name the artist. Some people are going to be like, plagiarism. But yeah, so I had that in mind. I'm like, I really want to recreate that sound. It's a folk narrative. It's the storytelling is folksy. It's messed up. It's symbolic. It's metaphorical rather than I went to the shop, I went to the park, I did this, you did this, you did da-da-da. So yeah, it's a lot of metaphors in there.
But we were talking about this earlier. It is untitled.
It is untitled.
As of yet.
Yes.
And why is this? Is it just because you just don't get a natural feeling for it? Or do you usually use lyrics as titles? Or are you looking for something broader here?
This is really embarrassing. That's because it's unfinished. That's why it's untitled. So, I usually, as of recently, I think I title my songs at the. Well, it really depends. Like Science was titled from the beginning, but I title my songs at the end if it doesn't have a clear concept I'm working from, and it's just this song's going to be about this, but it's not like science symbolic, you know. So with this one, similar thing happened, and I think I had a struggle of getting an idea across, and now that I feel like I've done that, I don't know if the song's actually quite obvious of what it's about, but the next thing is finding the title within the song, or I don't know what I'm gonna do. We'll see. It needs a bridge as well, so we'll see after that.
Are you up for collaborations? You up for people sending in their thoughts? And
Yes, absolutely. Email me, natamusicofficial@gmail.com.
Here we go.
I reply to all emails.
Yeah. And are you looking to release this, or is this not? You're not even thinking about that yet because I know it's unreleased. Or do you have anything in mind? What's coming up for this year for Nata?
So at the moment, I am working on a body of work, meaning that I really want to leave the singles behind. I think I've done enough fluctuation of sound, so I think releasing a body of work would be my next challenge, my next thing, my next kind of grabbing the audience, luring them in type of thing, which is very exciting. And this is what I'm working on at the moment. It's in the writing, recording process, so it's very like pre-production. But my deadline is 2022. So you might be seeing music from me. You will be seeing music from me in 2022. Yeah, definitely. It's not in the release plan yet. It's in the recording plan at the moment.
It's still exciting though.
Very exciting.
So if we want to keep up with this and see your updates, see where you're going this year, where can we find you on social media?
Nata Music Official. Nata like Natalia, but not really. Music, like music, and official.
Beautiful. Well, Nata, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been amazing chatting to you.
It's been amazing. It's been a pleasure being here again.
Thank you.
Your routine is back, but you still don't seem to find a way out of the strife of Tylenol and candy canes. Sugar's bad for you, at least that's what my student said. And lately he just feels like they should be teaching me instead. Who am I to talk when I'm still a cog in your machine? But at least I gave up toxic friends and nicotine, working my way up to fight the overthinking game. It's all diamond from your run. That's why they tell you to stay in the city. This town ain't so pretty. Keep sipping your red wine. Promise you it will be okay. Everyone's feeling this way down the ladder. Go talk to your mother and don't blame the other for writing your story ahead. I'm just trying to feed you some sense. No, it doesn't make sense. Mumbling words, setting tones, scared of Adderall. Missing San Francisco, Jesus, that was years ago. My dreams are too integral to let go of. And time is something you shouldn't let go of. And stay in the city, this town ain't so pretty. Keep sipping your red wine, I promise you it will be okay. Everyone's feeling this way down the ladder. Go talk to your mother and don't blame the author for writing your story ahead. I'm just trying to feed you some sense. No, it doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. I said stay in the city, this town ain't so pretty. Keep sipping your red wine, I promise you it will be okay. And lay down the light, go talk to your mother, and don't blame the author for writing your story ahead. I'm just trying to feed you some sense. No, it doesn't make sense. I said it doesn't make sense.